money, giving, and thanksgiving. Wrapping up this whole series today, focusing on Thanksgiving. Next week, Christmas season starts, Advent season. Technically, it's Advent season. Christmas season's not till after Christmas. That always made my head hurt, so I just think of it all as Christmas season. But next week, we're starting into the Christmas series, and that's very exciting. But I'm really, really excited about this message today, too. And this definitely is one of the more kid-friendly messages, even for the ones that I try to make kid-friendly, because I'm going to tell 3 stories today that will give us what I believe is a good wrap-up to money, giving, and thanksgiving, and then we'll tie Scripture into those stories as well. So we're talking about having a thankful heart today. Another thing I completely forgot to mention to folks is that a couple weeks ago I did the radio devotionals for the local station, and I did that series. It's a Sunday morning plus 5 shorter devotionals for the weekdays, and I did that on the fruit of the Spirit. And my brain started asking myself, tying together the fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, those sorts of things, with the parable of the sower, where Jesus said a man went out and sowed seed. Some of it fell on rocky soil, some on the path, some on the thorns, some on good soil. And what fell on good soil grew and bore much fruit. And I thought, what kind of soil, what condition do our hearts need to be in order for the fruit of the Spirit to grow? And thankfulness, gratitude is not listed as one of the fruits of the Spirit. But I believe thankfulness, gratitude, is really what cultivates our hearts so that the fruit of the Spirit can grow. That attitude of gratitude, having a thankful heart. So I've got 3 stories I want to tell. Guys, if you want to come up and sit on the front for the stories, that's cool. If you want to stay where you are for the stories, that's fine as well. But the first story is the story of the selfish giant. And the story of the selfish giant doesn't start with the giant, it starts with the kids that lived in his village. So the kids would come and play in the giant's garden. The giant had a beautiful garden. It had lots of fruit trees, pear trees, apple trees, peach trees. It had flowers, it had bushes. The birds would come and they would land in the trees and they would sing, and there were flowers on the ground, and there was grass, and there was a fountain. It was a wonderful, beautiful garden, and the children would come and play in it. Now you might ask yourselves, what about the giant? Weren't they afraid of the giant? They were not afraid of the giant because none of these kids had ever seen the giant. The giant had been gone for years, like 10 years. None of the kids had even ever seen him. And every day after school, when school was going on, they would stop at the giant's garden and play on the way home. And on the weekends, when there was no school, they would come and play. On Sunday after church, they would go play in the garden. And it was a beautiful garden, and the children had a wonderful time there. But then one day, the giant decided to come home. What the kids didn't know was that he'd been away to a town a long, long way away, visiting with his cousin, the ogre. And the giant finally ran out of things to say, so he decided to go home. And he came back home late at night. He walked into his castle, he went into his bedroom, he crawled into his bed, and he fell asleep. And he woke up and he heard people outside his window. And he looked out his window and he saw all these children playing in his garden. And the giant said to himself, that garden is my garden is for me, and no one else gets to share in my garden. So he ran down, and as you probably would not be surprised, the children were very afraid of the angry giant. And he chased all of the children away. And he decided that he was going to build a wall around his garden so that no one else could come in. My garden is for me, said the giant. And he spent the rest of the summer building the wall, and in through the fall building the wall. And by the time winter came, the wall was done. It was a big wall, it was a high wall, it was a strong wall, and the kids couldn't come in. And the giant sat, and when he got up out of bed every morning and looked out his window, he saw his garden. And he went down and he sat in his garden. But winter came, and with it came the snow and the frost. and the hail and the wind. And it was a very cold winter. And there was lots of snow and everything froze and there was frost every morning. But when spring came, a very strange thing happened. Outside of the wall, the grass started to grow, the flowers started to come up, the trees started to blossom. But none of that happened inside the giant's garden. The snow stayed and the frost stayed. And when summer came and the corn was growing and the leaves were green and the flowers were off the trees and the little fruit started to grow outside the garden, inside the garden, the frost and the snow, they said, hey, this is pretty good. We're getting to hang around here for a long time. Let's go get the north wind. He'll enjoy this too. And they got the north wind and he came in and it made it even colder in the giant's garden. And then when fall came and the pumpkins were harvested and the corn was harvested and the apples and pears and peaches were being picked, none of that was happening in the giant's garden. Instead, the snow and the frost and the north wind, they called on their friend Hail, and he came in and there were hailstorms, just giant balls of ice falling out of the sky, but only in the giant's garden and on his house. It broke his roof, it broke his windows, it was a mess. And spring and summer and fall never came in the giant's garden. And winter came back again. And things just continued the same. And the giant would wake up every morning and he was not as happy as he was before. He liked spring, he liked summer, he liked the fall. He liked winter too, but not all year round. And then one morning, late in the winter, he woke up and he heard an extraordinary sound. It sounded to him like choirs of heavenly angels. It sounded to him like the best band. What's the best band ever? Who's the best band ever? You got a favorite band? Well, sounded like Imagine Dragons. But it wasn't. He looked out the window and there was just a bird sitting in one of the trees out in his garden. And he looked at it a little closer and he saw that the tree had some blooms on it. And he looked at it a little closer and he saw there was a kid in his tree. And then he looked around and he saw other trees and they had kids in them. And every tree had a kid in it. And the tree was starting to bloom and there were birds there. And the giant realized just how much he'd been missing by chasing the kids out. So the giant, well, he decided to go down and welcome the kids in. But before he left the window, he did notice one more thing. He noticed a tree at the far corner of the garden that was still bare and still had frost on its branches. And there was a little boy at the bottom of that tree, and he was just crying because he wanted to climb up in the tree, but the branches were too high. And the tree wanted to climb up. It was leaning over as far as it could, but he couldn't quite reach the boy, and the boy couldn't quite reach the branches, and he was just crying. And the giant came down, and all of the other kids, well, see, what had happened was all of that snow and all of that ice and all of that hail had broken part of the giant's wall. And the kids had snuck in and started playing. And they all ran out through that broken wall, except the littlest boy who was standing under the coldest tree, and he was crying. He was crying so hard they didn't even hear the giant or see him coming. And the giant came up beside him, and he picked the boy up, and he placed him carefully in the top of the tree. And the boy laughed, and a bird came and sang, and the tree, whoa, you got a motorcycle, and the tree burst into bloom. And the giant told the boy that all of the children could come back. And the next day, all of the kids did come back. And they played, and the giant tore down his wall. It didn't take him nearly as long to tear it down as it took him to build it. And he said, my garden is for all the children. Absolutely. And the children came back, except for the littlest boy. He never came back after that very first day. But summer after summer and spring and fall after fall and spring after spring, the children would come and play in the giant's garden year after year after year. And the giant would go play with them until he got very old. Because even giants get old after a while. And he got very old, and he got a little sore, and he got a little stiff, and he got a little feeble. And finally, all the giant could do was kind of shuffle down his steps and sit in his chair and watch while the children played. Until one day, he woke up And he looked out his window, and it was wintertime. And so he didn't expect to see any kids in the garden. Didn't expect to see any kids at all, but he looked out in his garden. Yeah, he looked out and took the mower outside. Oh, Chickamauga. Oh, okay. And he looked out his window, and in the middle of winter, he saw one tree that was blooming, and there were birds in it. And he looked, and he saw the littlest child standing under that tree, at the bottom of the tree. And the giant went down the stairs as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast anymore, and he shuffled out to the tree, and he saw the little boy, and then he became angry because he saw that the little boy had scars in his hands and scars in his feet. And he said to the little boy, "Who dared to harm you?" And the little boy said, "Don't be mad. These scars are scars of love, and I have them for you. And you let me play in your garden many years ago, and you've let the children play in your garden all the years since. And now I'm taking you home to play in my garden, which I call paradise forever and ever." And the giant laid down, and he died, and he went with the boy to be in paradise forever. And that's the story of the selfish giant. Now, what does that have to do with Thanksgiving? Here's what I think. What do you think?
Sharing is caring, and look, it says it on the wall.
Yep, the story of the selfish giant. Here's what I think that has to do with Thanksgiving. Is I think the giant wasn't really thankful for his garden to begin with. He thought it was his garden. I earned it. He wasn't thankful for it. He liked it, but he wasn't thankful for it. And so he wasn't thankful for the children playing in it. That's a good thing. But when he missed the children, and he missed the flowers, and he missed the fruit, and he missed the warmth, and all of the love of the children, then he remembered to be thankful for the children. And once he was thankful for the children, and he was thankful for his garden, then he could share his garden because he was thankful for it. If we get something and we think, "I earned this, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine," we're not as likely to share it. But if we know it's a gift, if someone gives us something that's really nice, and it's like, wow, that's a gift, and we're thankful for it, then it's easier to share it because we know it doesn't really, it's not really just ours at all. It came to us from someone else. And there's a Bible verse in the book of Exodus that says this. They took up a big offering. They were building a church. They were building a church building. It was a portable building, kind of like a tent. And they got so much stuff that they had to tell the people, "Stop bringing stuff in. We don't need any more. You've brought more than enough already." And it said they had to be restrained from bringing more in because what they had was already more than enough to do the work. They were so thankful. The people that did that, God had done such amazing things for them. He had saved them from slavery. He'd saved them from being killed by an enemy army. He'd saved them from dying of starvation and thirst by miraculously giving them food and drink and meat. And they were so thankful that they were willing to give. So much that they had to tell them, "Hey, you've already given away so much, you can stop giving now." That's enough because they were thankful. So that's story number one. You ready for story number two? This is the story of the hidden treasure. This is the story of the hidden treasure. This is the story about a man named Isaac, Aaron's son. Isaac, Aaron's son, lived in a town. Have you ever heard of the country of Poland? He lived in the country of what? Puppy what?
A puppy selector.
Ah, yes. Okay, yes. So Isaac, son of Aaron, lived in the town of Krakow in the country of Poland. And this was a long time ago, back when people still believed that dreams had messages in them sometimes. I kind of still believe that now too, but lots more people believed it then. And Isaac had a dream. He was Jewish, And he knew that his ancestors had dreams which God spoke to them. And he started having a dream. Isaac was a very poor man. He lived in a very small house with his family, and he worked very hard all day, every day, except the Sabbath. He would work to make enough money for his family and him to live. And he would come home at night, and he was very tired, and he would collapse in his bed, and he would sleep all night long, and then get up and go to work again the next day. And then he started having a dream. And in this dream, he wasn't in the city of Krakow, he was in the city of Prague, which was in another country a long way away. And he was standing on a bridge in the city of Prague, and he was looking over the bridge down into the water, and he saw a treasure in the water. And the water was so clear he could see all the way to the bottom, and he could see a treasure there. And he dreamed that same dream every night for 2 weeks. He dreamed that same dream. And finally he said to his wife, yes. And he said to his wife, wife, I love you. And I know it will be hard if I'm gone, but I have to go to Prague and find that treasure. I think God is giving me a message that there's a treasure in Prague. And so he left, and he had to walk all the way. 4 days it took him to walk to Prague. 4 days. And when he got there, it took him time to find the bridge that he saw in his dreams, but he eventually found it, and he saw it, and it looked just like the bridge in his dreams. And he went up onto the bridge, and he was leaning over the bridge, and he was looking for the treasure, and it was nighttime. He was looking for the treasure. Everything was just like his dream, except when he looked down in the water, looking for the treasure, he didn't see it. But he kept looking and looking and looking, thinking maybe the sun will come out. And after a while, he heard a voice behind him. And it wasn't a friendly voice, it was a mean voice. And it said, hey, you, what are you doing here? And Isaac stood up and he turned around, and it was a policeman. In fact, it was 3 policemen. And they were not happy at all to see a stranger there. And in those days, as in this day, there were many Jewish people that dressed in a way that made it clear that they were Jewish. Because everyone knew if you dressed like that, you're Jewish. And that's how Isaac was dressed. And the man said to him, what are you doing here? You're a Jew. Jews aren't allowed in this part of the city. Isaac was very scared. He was so scared, he decided the best thing to do was tell the truth. And so he looked at the man and he said, I'm only here. I didn't mean to trespass, but I'm here because I had a dream. Every night for 2 weeks, I had a dream that there would be treasure under this bridge, and that I should come to the bridge here and get the treasure. And the guy looked at him and said, you're nuts. You're stupid. What kind of stupid thing is that? There's no treasure down there. And I can tell you how stupid you are, because I'm smarter than you, said the policeman. He said, every night for 2 weeks, I had a dream too. And my dream was that in the house of some guy named Isaac, son of Aaron, up in Krakow, there was under the stove in his kitchen a buried treasure. But you don't see me going up to Krakow looking for some guy named Isaac, son of Aaron, and digging a hole in his kitchen, do you? And Isaac, son of Aaron, said to him, no, I don't see you doing that. And I promise I'll never come back and trespass in your city again. And then Isaac, son of Aaron, walked home. It only took him 3 days to walk home. And he got back to his house, and he got his wife to help him, and they moved the stove in his kitchen, and they dug a hole under the stove, and they found a treasure right there in his own house. Now, what does that have to do with Thanksgiving? What do you think? What? Yeah. Yep. Seeing, giving. What do you think? The selfish giant? Is that? No, the hidden treasure. So, here's what I think that has to do with Thanksgiving. Sometimes there are things that we can be thankful for that we don't even know about. Sometimes the things we can be thankful for are hidden. And we have a... Thankful for the dream, thankful for the walk all the way down to Prague, Thankful for the policeman who was mean to him, because if the policeman hadn't found him and been mean to him, he never would have found out about the treasure in his own house.
If it was nice, he
Still wouldn't have found it. But he found out that he already had a treasure, and it was right in his own home. He just didn't know it was there. And sometimes we have treasures like that. There's things that God has already put in our lives, people and things, and we're not thankful for them because sometimes we don't realize they're treasures. But if we're thankful for them, if we see them as treasures, we can be thankful for them. And that reminds me of this verse. Yeah. This is another verse in the Bible. It says, don't be anxious about anything. Don't worry about anything. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, that means by asking, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. So one of the things we can do is if we need something, we feel like we don't have it, we don't have enough, we can ask God. God doesn't give us everything we ask for, that's for sure. But if we can be thankful for the things that God has already given us, and we can ask for God for the things that we don't have, that we really feel like we want or need, and then we can trust God to take care of us like He took care of Isaac. Sometimes He gives us a treasure. Sometimes He gives us a person as a treasure. Sometimes the treasure is a pot of gold. Sometimes the treasure is a person who loves us and cares for us. Sometimes the treasure is a safe place to be. Sometimes the treasure is a good friend. There are lots of different treasures God gives us.
I'm thankful that my grandma was alive, because if she wasn't, I'd probably be in foster care still.
And that's a treasure. Your grandma's a treasure for you. And I bet if you ask your grandma, you might find out that you're a treasure for her too. Maybe. Yeah. So, but those treasures God puts in our hearts and puts in our lives and puts in people around us. And if we're thankful for them, if we can remember to be thankful for them, then God can give us peace too. Not always lots of money, but Isaac's treasure was one kind of treasure. Other kinds of treasures are just as good and sometimes even better. But God will give us peace when we're waiting for ours. When we're thankful, God can give us peace while we're waiting to find the treasure that God's hidden around us. All right? Now I've got one more story. This is a story from the Bible. This is a story of a woman with a broken jar and a heart of love. So this is a true story. It happened to Jesus.
Okay, why did it just mention a broken jar? That don't mean anything.
Well, that's what I'm going to tell you about. I'm going to tell you about the broken jar. The woman had a jar. It was a jar made of alabaster, which was very precious and very expensive. And it had perfume in it. And the perfume was very precious and very expensive. It was a treasure. And the woman had it in an alabaster jar. And the thing with those kind of jars is the only way to get the treasure out is you had to break the jar. And it was perfume. And once you broke the jar and got the perfume out, it was gone and the jar was gone. And you didn't have any of it left. But it was her treasure. She had a treasure. And then one day she met Jesus. And we don't know what happened between her and Jesus, but we know this, that Jesus was invited by someone else in her town, invited to go to that person's house. He was a very important person. He was a wealthy person. He was a very respectable person. And he invited Jesus into his house, but he didn't treat Jesus very nice. They had different customs. So if someone comes in my house or in your house, what are some things you do to make sure they know that they're welcome? What do you do to make sure they know you're welcome? Invite them? Yeah.
I'll give them a list of what they can do and what they
Can't do. Let them know what they can do, what they can't do. Sometimes we'll offer people like a can of pop or a bottle of water as a way of saying welcome to the house. Sometimes we say, hey, you want to have dinner with me? Sometimes, I went to someone's house once and they had slippers by the door. So that everyone came in their house, they had nice, warm, fluffy slippers they could wear in their house. I thought that was pretty cool. I've never done that myself, but I thought that was pretty cool. Sometimes you shake a person's hand or give them a hug so they know they're welcome. That's a way. Well, in Jesus' day, they did different things. to let people know they were welcome. It was really dry and hot and dusty where Jesus lived, and everybody wore sandals, and so their feet would get really dirty. So when you went into someone's house, one of the things they would do is they would take water, take off your sandals, and wash your feet so you'd have nice, clean feet. And that was a way to say, we're glad you're here, welcome. Simon didn't do that for Jesus. Another thing they would do is they would give, instead of a handshake, as, we give people handshakes and hugs today to say you're welcome in my house, they would kiss them. Not like a romantic kiss, but more like a kiss you might give your mom or your dad or your grandma on the cheek to say, I love you. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Simon didn't give Jesus a kiss on the cheek when he came into his house. The other thing they would do, which to me is the strangest thing of all, because I would never want anyone to do this to me, but this was the kind of thing they did. They would pour oil on their head. Again, it was very dry and very dusty, and the oil would be soothing for their scalp on their head, and it would also help their hair because it was so dry where they lived and so dusty where they lived. But Simon didn't pour oil on Jesus' hair. He did invite him to dinner, though. And as they were at dinner, and they ate dinner different than we do too. We sit at chairs at a table. They also had their food on a table, but the table was very low and they didn't have chairs. They would recline, lie down on cushions and kind of lean on the table with one arm and eat with their other arm and kind of have their feet sticking out behind them or beside them. And while Jesus was eating dinner in Simon's house, that woman came in. Simon didn't invite the woman to dinner. He didn't like the woman. He thought the woman was kind of gross and disgusting. And he didn't want anything to do with her. He didn't really even want her in his house. He didn't want to be associated with her. He thought she was just gross. And probably if Jesus hadn't been there, she would never have wanted to go in Simon's house, and Simon would never have let him come in her house. But Jesus was there, and she came in for the dinner party, but she didn't sit at the table. She knelt down behind Jesus. And you know what she did? She cried. She was so thankful for Jesus, for what he had done, that she was weeping. She was crying, and she cried so much that her tears washed Jesus' feet clean. And then she kissed his feet, and she used her hair to dry his feet off. And then she took her treasure, that alabaster jar, and she broke it, and she poured out the perfume on Jesus' feet. And Jesus said, Simon, when I came, you didn't kiss me, but this woman hasn't stopped kissing my feet. You didn't wash my feet, but she washed my feet with her tears. And you didn't anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with her perfume. Simon, this woman has loved me much more than you have, because she received more from me than you have. What do you suppose she received from Jesus? Any guess? Jesus said that what she received was forgiveness. She was forgiven. We don't know what she'd done. We don't know what she'd done, but she'd been forgiven, and she was so thankful for the forgiveness that she couldn't stop loving Jesus. And that's the other thing with thankfulness. When we're thankful for things, it's easier to be loving to people. We can be, when someone gives you a really good gift, it's kind of easy to love them, isn't it? At least for a while. They give you something nice. Ooh, thank you. If we remember how much God has given us and how much He's loved us, we can be thankful to God and love God. Thankful to Jesus and love Jesus. We can also love the people around us. And that's one of the things a thankful heart does for us. It helps us to love other people. So a thankful heart, like the selfish giant, that thankful heart helps us be generous and share with others. And a thankful heart, like it did for Isaac, son of Aaron, can help us be patient until we see the treasures God has hidden all around us. And a thankful heart will help us love other people. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. This is what Jesus said. He said this to Simon. I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. We don't know what she did, but Jesus says, I've forgiven them all, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. And she loved a lot. She'd been forgiven a lot, and she was very, very thankful. So my hope is, this Thanksgiving week, my hope is that we will all have a thankful heart. And that thankful heart will help us share with others, and that thankful heart will help us love others. And I hope that thankful heart will help us be at peace and patient and help us see the treasures God has hidden in our lives.